everybody. I can't believe we're to week 24. We're so many weeks in, I think 6 weeks in, 6 weeks of working on your memoir. I told you this would be an intense process, but remember that the end goal is to have something you're proud of, that you can hang on to, that you can share with your family and friends, and that honors the memory you've chosen to tell. So this week we are going to work on the ending. So many of you are asking and wondering, how do I bring my story to a close? How do I end my memoir? Because the focus of our writing is not the entirety of our life, but a single memory or series of memories, there has to be some kind of cutoff that's natural. It has to feel right. Good memoirs need to be aware of this, or be aware when a specific memory is finished. A definitive ending should leave the reader with a complete picture of what happened in your life. That's really important to make sure that you bring it to a natural end, but one that leaves your reader satisfied with what they've read. A lot of times I have students who want to be tricky and want to include cliffhangers, and this is my warning. Don't do that. None of us have our 6-digit advance checks for a sequel. No publishing company has paid you $100,000 to write a sequel. So don't pretend like you have the opportunity. You are welcome to continue writing on your own, and I highly encourage it. But your reader, me, and anyone you choose to share this with, won't have that satisfaction at the end if you leave them with a cliffhanger. And in this case, that's not a good feeling. Sometimes when you're reading a series of books, it is. But for this memoir, it is not. Tell them what they need to know, because you'll never have the opportunity to tell them again. End the story. If the conflict is still ongoing, like you're still dealing with whatever's happening in this memoir, find some way to reflect that makes the ending feel purposeful. So there are a couple of moves that you can try. This is really tricky because if you Googled how to end a memoir, you're going to get a million different websites with a lot of different advice. So I took kind of some of the techniques that I've seen that have been successful for students. The first is circling back. So let's say you start your story with an image. Work your way through the story and come back to that image. Or you start in the middle of a conversation. Work your memoir back to the rest of that conversation. It's circling back means you can point from something in your conclusion directly back to your introduction. To me, it feels like you're coming full circle. You relate something in the beginning to something in the end. And think about how your entire story leads to that ending. You'll see the student example this week, and she circled back. She has an image that she creates in the first paragraph that she mentions again in the last paragraph, and it's a beautiful way to make your memoir feel complete. Another technique is reflection. This can be tricky, and it's just going to take a bunch of attempts. You're going to have to write and revise until you get it right. Most students who try this will quickly fall into the trap of cliche. And if you don't know cliche, it's a typical traditional ending that anybody could come up with, like the happily ever afters. Or I get a lot of students who want to end with sentences like, I learned the lesson that I should be patient and good things will come to those who wait, period. We are not writing those kind of stories. These are much more emotional. They're much more personal. I don't want any of those cheesy, generic, cliche endings. Find a way to let the lesson reveal itself. Find a way to let the story show that you learned about patience. And you can reflect in an honest way at the ending without it being cliche. You might not get it on the first try, but you'll get it if you revise. Figure out the why is another technique. Why does this story matter? Why has it stuck with you? What is its significance? And again, don't fall into the trap of, I remember this moment because. Just write. Let it be natural. Don't try to fit it into some sentence stem or template that someone would give you if you were in 5th grade trying to write your first narrative. Really think about it and work on it and be honest and vulnerable in it. Or just do it your own way. Don't let it feel forced, cheesy, or cliche is just the number one rule. Don't let it end with anything like, the lesson I learned from this is, or this taught me that. I will never forget this because. A good ending takes more effort than that. It requires you to think harder than that, to try harder than that. So give yourself some time. If you're stuck on the ending, put your memoir away for a few days. Let it marinate, let it sit there, think about it, but don't work on it. And come back to it a few days later and see what happens. That's oftentimes when the magic happens, is when you let it go for a minute and you come back to it to see what you didn't see the last time you worked on it. There are a couple of examples in this slides presentation, some of my favorite endings to memoirs that are just beautiful, powerful sentences. For example, from Black Boy by Richard Wright. Black Boy is the story of an African-American man from Arkansas who bounced back and forth all over the Delta. He had kind of an unstable home life, and he spent his whole life trying to feel accepted and part of a community, and he struggled to find that. So the end of his memoir, actually the first half of his memoir, is him leaving the South, wanting to move to the North, to find more opportunities, to find more community. And these are his last sentences, and I almost can't read them without crying. They're so beautiful. So take a second and look at them. He said, "I stepped from the elevator onto the street, half expecting someone to call me back and tell me that it was a dream, that I was not leaving. This was the culture from which I sprang. This was the terror from which I fled." So in that sentence, he reflects on where he came from and why where he came from has terrorized him his entire life. It's a beautiful contradictory paradox, but it's just such a thoughtful way to end. Another ending is from One Liar's Beginning, which I gave you at the beginning of this unit, where the kid lies about eating the Red Hots and realizes how much power he has in lying. And this is his realization. Instead of saying, "I learned a lesson," he said, "It's a wonderful epiphany." If you don't know that word, it means discovery. With a lie, I can change reality. With a lie, I can change the world. That's a big deal. He realized that by telling a lie, he can change the reality he lives in. It's a powerful story. If you didn't read that one, please go back to it. It's a good one. I've used Tinder Bar a lot by J.R. Moehringer. It's one of my favorites. This is just the end of the chapter that I shared with you. He said, "I shook my head. She walked quickly toward me, and I wrapped my arms around her, startled by how much I loved her and how intensely I needed her. As I held my mother, clung to her, cried against her legs, it struck me that she was all I had. And if I didn't take good care of her, I'd be lost." So in that moment, he's realizing that even though his father is absent from his life, he has his mother to lean on, and he has to care for and nurture that relationship if he does not want to end up alone. So that's a powerful ending. Another one is from The Glass Castle. It's from that chapter I've shared with you before about the little girl setting herself on fire while she cooks hot dogs. She's in the hospital at the end of that chapter, and she ends with that last action and a piece of dialogue. "Dad hurried down the hall with me in his arms. A nurse yelled for us to stop, but Dad broke into a run. He pushed open an emergency exit door and sprinted down the stairs and out into the street. Our car, a beat-up Plymouth we called Blue Goose, was parked around the corner, the engine idling. Mom was up front. Lori and Brian in the back with Juju. Dad slid me across the seat next to Mom and took the wheel. 'You don't have to worry anymore, baby,' Dad said. 'You're safe now.'" The irony is that she was back in the hands of a family who couldn't take care of her and neglected her and put her in danger. So there is some irony there, but she does end with dialogue, which is a really powerful way to end your story. For some of you, this may be a frustrating experience because I can't just give you a slide that shows you the one right way to end your memoir. And some of these ways, or all of these ways that I just showed you, may not work for you. But at this point, you're all going in 150 different directions with 150 different stories that hold infinite possibilities for how they could end. You just have to play around with it. That's what I'll tell you if you come to a writing conference. I'm happy to help you in a writing conference. But before you request one, try it. Try to see what you can do. Write a couple of endings, and I just spelled "right" incorrectly. I will fix that. That's embarrassing. Write a couple of endings and see which one works best. Ask a friend to read it and give you advice. All you can do is try it. If it doesn't work, that's what revision is for. So if none of these ways work for you, let me know. Try and see what you come up with. And if you still need help, I'm happy to do a writing conference with you. The ending of your memoir is a unique opportunity to show why a piece of writing matters to you. This is what readers are working towards. This is what they're waiting on. So give them what they're wanting. It takes some effort and it takes some energy and it takes some thought. So make sure you give it everything that it deserves.